So one of the really important tools in adaptive and managed grazing is poly-electric fence. Basically fully portable. It's got a wire integrated in it. It is obviously off right now. Ideally, these fences are running at about 7,000 volts. The cows, once they've learned once, they tend to respect it even if it's not on anymore, or if your charge is low because you've got something grounding out or something. The visual ultimately is very effective. But the crazy thing is that a 1,200 pound cow will respect this if you set them up for success at the beginning. So you can't just throw them into a pasture where there's good stuff on the side that they're not supposed to go into and expect them to learn. You got to set them up just like any training thing with a dog or a horse or anything like that. You got to set them up for success. So we started, these steers actually were started at the ranch that they were at before they came to us, but we start them in pastures where they've got good grass where they're at, and then there's a perimeter fence that they cannot escape if they do get past it. And then after a shock or two, they're pretty observant of it. It's very lightweight in general. This gets spooled up on a reel, and then we've got these pickets, which these are the step-in pickets. And then you can also use fiberglass ones that you hammer in. The step-in ones tend to be a little more versatile in our rocky ground. The fiberglass are a little more challenging. And then you just run it through the pigtail here. And this is insulated. And then you got hot wire throughout. Generally, grass touching the fence is not an issue. You don't really want to run it through thick brush because that can sometimes ground it out. There's no fire risk or anything like that. If a human gets shocked by it, it hurts like hell, but it's not going to hurt anyone in the long run. And it's all run, on our ranch, it's all run off of solar power. So we have a solar panel with a marine battery that keeps it charged at night, and then during the day, as long as it's not like super socked in and raining all day, it's basically on the solar. But that's the battery is a good backup. Other ranches have electrical hubs on the ranch that they are able to run it off of, which is certainly an easier way to do it because then you're not dealing with the battery hauling around, but it's a pretty slick process. The other one would be if you did a permanent high tensile electric fence to subdivide your pasture, and that's also a really powerful tool. We are actually in the process of putting high tensile in on the ranch. We've not had much to begin with. But one of the big powerful things about the portable electric fence is that you can choose what to include and what to exclude every time you build fence. So maybe one year you want them grazing the vegetation, all the tules and the cattails and whatnot that are in the pond. And then maybe the next year you don't want them to do that. Or maybe one year you've got great grass in an area and then the next year the grass is really crummy and you don't want any impact in there. You can choose to include those or exclude them. And just adapt to the conditions on the ground. And then you can make your big pasture as small as you want, depending on the forage and your ability to move them regularly and how many animals you have and all of the different factors that go into this.
People think that it's super labor intensive, and once you get the hang of it, it can be really quick. 2 of us can knock it out in 30 minutes, an hour, depending on what we're doing. This fence took a little bit longer because there's brush that we're going through that, like Christy said, we needed to trim off. But in general, it's a really effective tool. Right now, we're moving and putting it up almost every day or every other day, depending on what size pasture we're in and what the goals are. In some of our other fields, there's a heavy elk population or heavy presence, so we're trying not to leave it in there too long that we interfere with their presence on the ranch, but also that we're effectively managing the cattle. So we might put it up the day before we move the cattle and then move them and then take down that previous one so that it's not just out for wildlife to get caught in. This one, we kind of had to pick 2 pastures just based on grazing right now, so we built this polywire fence and then another one, and that was cool to be able to have options and knocked it all out pretty quickly. The previous pasture that we were just in, all of the cows were drinking off of one water source, so we kind of did a band around that to start with. They're grazing closer to the water, and then eventually we moved them out in sections, kind of like a ripple effect. And then they were able to go back to the water, but they already grazed that. So we really didn't see a lot of back grazing on that almost at all, other than like a couple of favorite areas. And then another tool that we'll use to make sure that we're getting good distribution throughout the pasture is putting our salt and mineral supplement, like lick sources, out away from the water. So we're strategically but quickly managing the cattle that can look on a map with GIS or Google Earth, and then, okay, we're going to put the salt and min there, we're going to do the polywire fence like this, and then be able to move off of that. Sometimes our pastures have multiple sources of water, so we can, and say they're in there for 3 days, put the first electric fence that they're drinking off of that first water source. Maybe the second day they're able to go back to that water source after we've pulled out that initial polywire fence. And then the third day, once we move them through that second polywire fence, they can drink off of that second water source. So it's kind of a really cool way to get that impact throughout the ground or on the ground, but not have anything overgrazing, which grazing is a concept of time, right? But yeah, so it's really cool to see that. And I think that's important to say because my partner and I lived down right where the cows were, and he was like, oh, are the cattle going to back graze because their water source is back there? And they're like, fresh grass is over there, sweet. Like, they're gonna hang out over there, they'll walk back, which is a short distance to get water, and then they're gonna go back to that fresh grass. So really getting that impact.